Dr. Gaurav Luthra. And Dr. Gaurav Luthra is Executive Director of Drishti Eye Institute, as we all know. And Gaurav Luthra is the Chairman Academic Committee, IRSI. He is a very well known and a very accomplished and a gifted cataract refractive surgeon with over hundreds of papers in international journals and over 200 papers in national journals. And the best part is he's always available for everybody at any time. He's also been awarded the Mohanlal Gold Medal for Best Scientific Paper at UPSOS, IRSI Gold Medal for 2008 Chennai, and ACOIN Gold Medal, and also the Subodh Agarwal Gold Medal Trophy. And Dr. Gaurav Luthra is going to be talking about the changing world of dry eye disease and diagnosis. Over to you, Dr. Gaurav.
Thanks a lot, Kamal. It's always a pleasure, and I congratulate MyHealthscape for organizing this interesting webinar, which is so different from what we are doing currently most of the time. So I hope this is going to be useful to everyone. And is my screen on now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I think what you nailed it by saying that dry eye is all around us in different ways, and we all have a flood of dry eye disease happening. So it's really changed from the time that I graduated. I was just looking back at how we were treating dry eye, and let me take you back to the 90s when Kamal and me were both in college at the same time, early 90s, and it was post-graduation days, and a lot of patients would come with irritation related ocular complaints. They came with something like yeah, okay. So we would end up giving them, if you would remember, Kamal, GSS 20, and that's it. Anybody with itching. So it was sulfacetamide or nafazine, yes, one of these things. And we would hardly, we wouldn't be looking, except unless we saw a physically evident dry eye, that would be you do a Schirmer's and, kind of. So I would think that our percentage of dry eye patients in those days would be as little as, maybe 1 or 2 out of 100 patients that we would actually label them as a dry eye. And look at today, I think today 90% of our OPT, we will add dry eye as one of the diagnoses for our patients. So as I said, dry eye was just a part of other systemic conditions, and it was not really a big entity of its own. And when we look at the history of dry eye disease, the first mention of our tears was recorded in 1550 BC. This was interesting for me as a water within, and in some Egyptian documents. And first mention of increased tear osmolarity was in 1941 by von Bahr. And it was only in the 60s that it was discovered that a decrease in lacrimal gland secretion leads to ocular surface desiccation. And in the 70s, we recognized that the ocular surface actually has an integrated functional unit. And it was only in the late 70s that the first mention of the role of the meibomian glands in the pathogenesis of tear film loss. So I think that makes it quite clear that it's not very old that we've actually been hearing about dry eye disease. And despite a lot of knowledge today, there is really no gold standard for the diagnosis. And as this webinar continues, I think other speakers are going to really talk at length about how we can investigate dry eye in a better way. I'm only going to list a few things. So if I remember and look back to my PG days, as I said, in the 1990s, I remember one of the first lubricants which actually came packaged in a bottle, and we were so excited that 1 or 2 companies have started making lubricating drops with methyl cellulose, and we had I think artificial tears and maybe one more product to start with, and they were kind of sought after that, oh, we have something for dry eye, and that would be prescribed specifically. And then look at today where we are. We have, like, I don't know, I think most of us, we have it's like a flood of lubricants which is available to us, and it's so difficult to actually commit to each company person that, okay, I'll write your lubricant, and each one of them breathing down your neck with different formulations and different preparations, one better than the other. So formally, the recognition of dry eye probably took place in a good way in the 1995 NEI industry organized workshop, which was held with the intent of defining dry eye disease, which was eventually defined as a disorder of the tear film due to tear deficiency or excessive evaporation. This was the definition which came about formally, and since that time, of course, we've come a long way. And now I call it, these are pandemic times, so I call it as the dry eye disease pandemic. I would have called it epidemic, but frankly, it is actually a pandemic. It's all around, it happens all over the world, and it's all around us all the time, affecting almost all of us. When I look back at the data in India, the interesting study from the RP Center by Dr. Tityal and Dr. Namrata and others, observed the prevalence of dry eye in North India to be at 32%, ranging anywhere from 18% to 50%, and affecting the age group, which is from 21 to 40 most often, with almost 50% people in this age group. And most often associated with video terminal users, smoking, and contact lens. These were the three things which probably increase your likelihood of developing a dry eye. And worldwide incidence in the US, at least, I was reading up some data, is in the 40%, and across the world it's quite variable. But India has higher dry eye incidence than we might imagine. And I think we all know in our own OPDs how badly it affects us. I just listed a few situations which, if you look back, you would think that almost all of every patient who walks into our clinic probably fits into one of these situations: computer vision syndrome, contact lens users, glaucoma medications. We all know that how our glaucoma patients come back with dry eye symptoms, and we end up treating them either with minimal use glaucoma drugs and preservative free drugs. And the whole concept of preservative free, how it came in over the last few years or many years. Cataract surgery patients who continue to get dry eye following refractive surgery, we are always so careful. And in that order, LASIK, PRK, and SMILE, decreasing order, we can say that we are always looking for alternatives to decrease the incidence of dry eye as refractive surgery has evolved over the years. Another area where I think dry eye recognition has now come in quite well is children who are on treatment for long-term seasonal allergic conjunctivitis. There again, lubricants have a great role to play. The elderly tend to have more significant dry eye. So I think by definition, the elderly will be another group of patients. The smokers, those people around them, air conditioning. So I think the list is almost endless. Patients with diabetes have higher predisposition. People with rheumatoid arthritis and other rheumatic diseases will have a correlation. And yes, I wanted to add this. I end up having so many patients, who, if you just ask them if they're suffering from dry eye, just ask them how often do you wash your eyes? And they will say, oh, I, love to wash my eyes. That's what we've been told by on television, on every, possible yoga teaching, that, you should fill some water in your mouth and, wash your eyes thoroughly. And I think all of us will agree that this can be one of the big factors. And I end up asking almost, all my dry eye patients how often they wash their eyes, and, counsel them to stop doing that if they want to get fine, in a better way. And then last but not the least, I think COVID times have really precipitated this dry epidemic. The children are taking the brunt of it, but so are all the adults who have no reason to go out, and stuck at home. They would be stuck with their phones and screens and handheld devices and their computers. All the classes happening. So many children are coming to a pediatric ophthalmology OPD with signs of digital eye strain and dry eye. So I think this has become like the killer shot for dry eye disease, and that's why our OPDs are full of patients with dry eye for treatments and for diagnosis. So I think that kind of brings about the importance of how dry eye has become so important. And these studies or these classifications which came up, starting with that 1995 one from the NEI group, and then the DUES classification. I think these will all come up during the course of this webinar, so I won't go into the detail. But when you come to diagnosing and treating dry eyes, these are very, very useful, classifications to understand, and the flow of, how you would diagnose and treat them. And there has been the OSDI, which has really been useful for us, and it can help us, do the discomfort subscale and the vision subscale, and then end up with a report which can help you, decide how you want to treat these patients. So necessity is literally the mother of invention, and there is a gamut of dry eye investigations which we'll be talking about. I'm just going to name a few of them so that for the sake of completion, you have the the lipid layer which can be checked. So these new devices which have come up have really made life easy. I have realized over the last 2-3 years that we started using this, the SBM, that it really changed the way we diagnosed our patients and treated our patients in a much better way than we could ever do before. The tear meniscus, we knew all these things. However, it was very difficult to document them all these times. So the tear meniscus height measurements have become much easier. The the breakup times, and the checking the stability of the tear film, and the blink detection rates, and the evaluation of the blinking motions, the meibography. I think there'll be a detailed talk on meibography. And then of course the MMP9 test, which can help us also decide about the whether to treat with steroid cyclosporins for inflammatory dry eye, or to evaluate further. And so there have also been newer modalities of treatment, which again we are going to listen to right after this. The EI, which is again a very useful device with the intense pulse therapy, the thermal pulsation therapies which are available today. So I think to summarize, I would like to say that the dry eye pandemic has silently crept upon us, just like glaucoma silently, is the thief of sight. I think dry eye has become one of the most prevalent things in our OPDs, and we better be well equipped to diagnose it better with modern diagnostics and then to treat them better. There's a range of treatments available today, and I think all of us need to be better equipped to handle both our diagnostics and our treatment modalities, so that we can treat our patients better. So with that, I would like to stop and request Kamal to take on from here.